This episode is brought to you by Adaptive, the software for builders that automates draws, budgets, and bookkeeping with AI. For over a year now, I've been partnered with Adaptive, and they've just been an amazing game changer in terms of efficiency in our time and all our bookkeeping. From the time we get an invoice, we import it into their system. The AI codes it, cost codes it, job codes it. All we have to do is review it, pass it through the people internally in the office, all digitally, and then it gets approved and paid all via ACH. It's becoming extremely fast and saving us countless hours a day and a week. When it comes to draws, all of our budgets now are set in Adaptive as well. So now when we cost code against the draws, we can do our change orders, and then with a click of a button, we can submit these draws to our title companies or to our homeowners for faster payment. If you're looking to save time, and if you're looking to be accurate, I highly recommend Adaptive. Additionally, if you'd like to listen to one of their founders share the story of Adaptive, you can listen to episode number 15 on the Curious Builder Podcast. Today on the Curious Builder Podcast, we had Troy and Joe Eiden on from Modern Design Cabinetry, and what a delightful conversation, hearing how they've expanded their company for the last 30 years and growing it to 65 people. This is going to be an amazing episode for those that are interested in scaling their operation, hearing what works and what doesn't work. Without further ado, here is Troy and Joe Eiden. Welcome to the Curious Builder Podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today, I'm joined with Troy and Joe Eiden from Modern Design Cabinetry. Welcome, guys.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Excited to have you on. Your entrance into the podcast has been probably one of the cooler ones. So a couple weeks ago now, from when we're recording this, we had a charity event for kids with the Joy Collaborative at one of our past homes, and you guys were. It was nice to have you there to help support the charity. But then you guys won the bid. We actually auctioned off a podcast and you guys auctioned on it, and so I thought that was really cool. I think we'll do that again in the future. So I got to meet you, I think, during the home tour, but also during that kind of crazy paint event at the end of the night. So thank you.
Such a fun event. It was so much fun. We had a blast.
Thank you very much for helping out with that noble cause. And let's talk about your business. Why don't you give us a little backstory? You guys are located pretty close here. You're out in Cologne, right?
Yep.
Okay. Well, why don't you go ahead, Troy? Why don't you launch us off and tell us how you guys started a cabinet shop, and we'll get into all the good stuff.
So do you want the long version or short version?
Well, we got an hour, so I guess I won't answer that. You can decide on that.
So we started out on my dad's farm in a little shed. I went to Votech for it. And then after Votech, I worked at 3 different cabinet shops, but I built a little building on my dad's farm. And then eventually I went on my own as Joe and I were dating.
This is what, you're a teenager or in your 20s?
That was back in 88. Oh, yeah, that doesn't mean nothing. Nobody does it. I would have been about 23, 22, 23.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, 23.
Yep. That just helps set the scene in my head.
Yep. So we started out on my dad's farm. I was doing it by myself, and then Joe would come and help a little bit. And then eventually we hired a couple of part-time people, and we were there since 2000. And then we
91 to 2000.
Yeah, 91 to 2000. And then we bought a building in Cologne, the Cologne Lumberyard. And when we moved to town, we had 5 people. And we bought it in 2000, and we've added on to that building 5 times. We grew it from the original building was 8,800 square feet to now it's 45,000 square feet.
Wow.
And then we also bought 3 years ago, bought another building in Norwood, which unfortunately it was the old grocery store building, but that's 23,000 square feet, and we currently have 65 people total that work at Modern Design.
Why, unfortunately? Just that you ran the grocery store so nobody can eat? They got to eat wood, or is it controversy here? Or what's going on?
No, that was the unfortunate part. I mean, it was a little bit... I didn't know if we wanted to be buying a building that was, their grocery store, but we were told that it's never going to be a grocery store again. But, people are protective about that. So, anyway, we made it past that.
The good news is nobody can drive by and egg you anymore.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So we bought that building, and there's currently, I believe, 10 people working there out of the 65. And then we also 3 years ago at the same time, because we like to do a lot of stuff at the same time, right, Joe?
Mm-hmm.
We started a showroom down in Rochester. So we have a person that runs the showroom down there. His name is Jody. And then we have 2 installers that are from the Owatonna area, so they can go do installs in Rochester. And then if we have some slow time down there, then they come up to the cities.
Wow.
So
yeah, I had no idea that your scale was that incredibly fast growing, but also that big. I mean, most of the cabinet shops that I interact with seem to run anywhere from 8 to 15 people. And we were laughing right when you walked in because you had this great hand signal, because on your website it shows 22 people. I was counting. It was like, hey, you've got, you guys as the principals, you've got 3 shop managers, 3 in design, which we get to late to 11 PMs, and then 6 estimators in office. I'm like, wow, 22. And you're like, nope, it's 65. I'm like, what do you do with 65? That is an incredible amount of cabinetry that's got to be going out the door.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of product going through for sure.
Well, okay, let's go back before you tell us your gems here on scaling, because I think this is going to be a really interesting story on the scaling. Let's go back to farming. What kind of farm were you growing up on?
So I grew up on a dairy farm.
Okay, a dairy farm.
Yeah, we had dairy cows, and we actually had pigs too.
Okay, and how did you know you had a inclination towards woodworking?
So I was the oldest of 8, and the first one, to get done with school, and there was just going to be no way that financially was probably going to happen.
I always stay farming, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was what I kind of wanted to do. But I just like being outdoors, and I like building stuff. So I just kind of landed on the cabinetry part of it. I was not a good student in school. I did really good in woodworking, but that's about it. And gym.
Every kid loves gym.
Yeah.
How did you, were you building like tree forts? Why cabinetry? There's trimming, there's framing, there's so many other things that have to do with being handy and craft. Like, why cabinetry? Because it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, but, and I'm not even gonna say a stereotype, but like the path of skill, cabinetry is one of the highest ones in my opinion, right? And I'm not saying that this is true or not, because there's certainly a lot of skill in framing, for instance. Like, I really much appreciate, I had longtime framers for 15 years, and now he's one of my project managers. And so I think framers are often thought of as, kind of like, wood butchers, like they just cut and run and gun. Yeah. But there's a lot of talent there. So I don't want anyone listening to think that I don't respect. But in terms of like where I see people in their careers go, it seems like they're younger in framing because it's a little bit harder on your body. You're out. Then a lot of those that maybe go into trimming, and then a lot of the trimmers end up going into cabinetry. Mm-hmm. But it was interesting that you skipped those and you went straight to cabinets. How did you?
I like being warm.
Yeah. You're used to being
I knew I'd be working inside. Yeah. I do like machinery too. Mm-hmm. So I guess growing up on the farm, I like welding. I just like building stuff and creating stuff. So I don't know, for some reason the woodworking, probably because of school, because we were able to take wood shop, which is unfortunate. I don't know if we want to go there yet.
Yeah, we do.
But the trades, the schools aren't doing as much of the metal shops and the wood shops and the mechanic stuff. So I had 4 years of that, and I enjoyed that. So that's kind of what led to where I got.
We're gonna put a pin in that because I want to come back to what you just said. But why don't we, Joe? What was your in those early years? Because how long did you date before this young stallion? You're like, I better marry him. He spits up his water on camera. It's been a long time since someone called Troy a stallion. How did you? Walk us through those early years of dating? And I assume it was kind of a one-man band, and it was the two of you. Or at what point did you start actually? We'll go back, talk a little bit about how the business grew in those early years.
Thank goodness after we got married, it was a few years in, we built the house right across the road on the farm. We bought some farmland from Troy's mom and dad, which is awesome. So we were close by. So I could, as we started having kids, we had four kids, so I could go over with the kids, and we could, because he worked so many hours in the beginning, just like these crazy long days. But we could, thank goodness we were close by, that I could go over with the stroller and get,
you could be, and the family side of that's got to be really nice, being home for dinner.
Yeah.
Right? If you're across the street, talk about.
I came home for supper and then got done and went back over there.
Right.
And worked late.
Yeah, worked into
my oldest daughter, unfortunately, I didn't spend a lot of time with my oldest daughter till probably 8 or 10.
When she was real little.
That's why we started to grow the company, so that it's easier to take off. At a certain point, once you start building different phases of the business, it's easier to take off some time and not feel overwhelmed before you leave and when you get back.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's very well said. And I think just given, that you're at 65, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on scaling. I feel like that's probably one of my greatest weaknesses, is scaling. I look around and I don't think time is necessarily a great, equalizer in who is scaled or who hasn't. I've been building for 20 years and we're still a small team. The biggest I've ever been is like 5 or 6, and 2 is the smallest I've ever been. So I've kind of floated between 2 and 6 in my career. But I look at some builders, I know a builder, he's been in business for 10 years. He's got 31 people. I mean, it's just like, some people, that's really what interests them and they're really good at it. Yeah. I've just never really put much thought into it. At what point did you realize you wanted to scale cabinetry?
I think, I don't know. I wanted to grow it a lot more than Joe did.
Yeah, I was always the one that was like, are you sure about this? I don't know about this. Another edition? Really?
Because you were probably doing anything, remodeling decks as well as cabinetry, or no?
No, just cabinets.
Always just cabinets.
Just cabinet.
Cabinets. Okay. So I'll back up just a tiny bit. So when we started dating, my wife, or Joe at the time when we were dating, this might have been after we got married, but her dad was good friends with a teacher. Now, back in the day, they had tech education, and they had these workstations. They were a quarter, they were like a V in a corner, or they were 2 halves, or they were a quad. And Joe's dad's friend was a teacher, and he had some things he didn't like on the design of it. So I went out there, modified it, and then I built one, and then he got me into this trade show deal up in St. Cloud, where it was specifically for teachers. So for like the next 6 years, I did those laminated workstations, and it was file cabinets, countertop, bookcase, and then above was a call center, like a light. So we did that for like 6 years. So it was,
and that's pretty much it. Like you were just locked on that education side?
for about 6 years, and then it kind of went away. But we did that for like 6 years, and it was crazy because it was like I couldn't get the order until the end of the school year, and it had to be installed by September. So and now I remember, it was before we got married, because we did that and built the house in the fall. And that was craziness. I'm surprised we made it to the wedding. Because I actually delivered the last classroom.
I mean, the wedding day would be great. Everyone that comes to the wedding, hey, we need your help.
Yeah. We delivered the last classroom 2 days before we got married. And it was nuts. So we did that. And then eventually we started getting into houses, and kind of that's where we landed. And then we do commercial work too. Like we've done My Burgers, we've done eye clinics, we've done a lot of different commercial stuff too, but we're still mostly residential.
Interesting. Wow, what a story. Maybe we'll put a pin in that and go back to the earlier pin about, the schooling. So like I graduated in 99, I'm 43. I went to Chaska, up pretty close to Cologne for those that aren't from Minnesota. And, we had shop class. Mr. Jacobs, he was awesome shop teacher, one of my favorite teachers. CO2 cars, little whatever. And my dad had a wood shop. He was a builder. So, I would tinker around downstairs. I was not really that talented, but I always enjoyed it. Yep. Do you know at what point did shop class and shop education leave the high school system? And is that only in certain cities, or was that a statewide thing here in Minnesota?
No, it's in some of the high schools, but not all of them.
Right.
For instance, I went to Votech in Eden Prairie. That was the woodworking deal that was there, and that got closed down during when was that? Was that during the recession? So around 2007 or 8, they closed down the Eden Prairie Votech, which was unfortunate because we would draw people that went to school there and would come work for us. And now it's just up in Brooklyn Park.
What about Dunwoody? Do they? I mean,
yeah, they do too. Yeah. But I think it's basically them at Dunwoody and Brooklyn Park. And then I know Alexandria Tech, they offer a little bit of cabinets, but it's kind of construction and cabinets combined.
Does Normandale have anything?
I don't think so.
I think St. Paul Technical has a few too.
Yeah,
a little small program.
Because we'll save this a little bit. All these ideas are coming to my mind here to talk about with you, because you had mentioned before we came online that you draw a lot of your shop workers from high schools. Tell us a little bit about where that is now. And I think we're going to see, for instance, a huge explosion in construction. But unfortunately, we have probably a 20-year gap we have to make up. I mean, probably not in your career and maybe not even in mine. We'll see if it can catch up, because it takes a long time for some of the stuff to get reseeded and, and kind of grow to fruition so that you can have talent.
Yep.
Where have you seen, like, when did you notice that there was less and less people coming into the industry that you could hire and draw in? And where do you see it right now? And what are you seeing down the road?
I think maybe 6 or 7 years ago, we really started seeing that we just could not find anyone to hire, and that's probably similar along the time, right along the same time that we joined that trades advisory with the Waconia School, and now we're also with the Norwood School, which has been awesome. But I think the wages have finally started to catch up. That people are like considering the trades as an option, and a lot of the students, it's a great option for, because a lot of times they're like, you got to go to college, you got to go to college. No, there's a lot of students that not the best path. So it's been really fun to get into the schools and talk to the students and have them come on tours of our shop and work with the other, because we have a bunch of people all that. There's an electrician, there's a metal shop, there's a whole bunch of people on the advisory council with us. So we all go in and we'll do like a meet the trades day before school, and we'll have 50 students come in and just talk to people about what it's like to work in the trades. And then maybe with a shop class, they come and tour the facility so they get to see, and they're like, wow, this is so cool. And a lot of stuff's way more computerized than they realize. The bad thing is that a lot of the schools can't keep up with the machinery because they have really
Correct.
outdated machinery. So then they're like, oh, this isn't any fun. The machinery's not that great. But you go to an actual shop and you're like, wow.
And in addition to that, the laws haven't caught up either, right? The schools have the old table saws where you can cut your fingers off. We have the saw stop ones where they can't cut their fingers off. They can cut the boards at the school if they're not 18, but when they come to work for us at 16, they cannot use the saws. And I'm like, the laws haven't caught up to the technology.
Oh,
like
interesting.
Some of that has to change.
Yeah, because it's all laser guided, right? So like if the plane is broken, those clamps, shut it down, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Interesting. Can you get some sort of a permit to have people under the age of 18
We
working on saws?
were trying to do teacher in the workplace, like Troy would be like an actual teacher in the workplace because he's such an expert in the field. That's the angle we're trying to take. That if Troy is an actual teacher, then they can run the saws under him as a teacher.
Because I would imagine, I'm blanking on his first name, but one of the state senators is out in Waconia.
Jim Nash.
Jim,
Nash.
I mean, he would be a huge advocate.
Yes.
I know he's big for housing first, and I wonder if there's a way.
He has been.
He's been at our group before. He's come to one of
the
our
meetings.
Yeah.
So,
So the
he has been
school
a good
is
advocate.
trying to work with the state on some of that right now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting.
So hopefully we'll get there.
Well, and you could see from the cost standpoint too. School. I mean, some of these machines now are several $100,000,
Yeah.
and so I'd understand how that is not probably doable. But it'd be really neat, especially for a more rural school. And I'm sure why it has to be rural, but maybe that's where a lot of at least the cabinet shops that I'm aware of are, where you could almost could the school subsidize it? Could the school pay, let's say, hey, 1 day a week for a half a day, is there part of your shop where like schools could come in? You could almost, and I don't know if that's something even a cabinet shop would want to do, but sort of a way that you have all the expensive equipment, plus you're training your future workforce, which is I assume what you're interested in. But how could you make that work other than just like a field trip or a day, make it more of an ongoing thing?
Because part of the problem is if they can't run that equipment till they're 18, by then they've already made their choice to go to college, right? So they're left with doing jobs that aren't quite as much fun. Like maybe it's cleaning some of the glue off of something or putting a drawer box together. But I mean, they're looking over going, I want to do that, but they can't because they can't run that piece of equipment, which is now safe, but the rules or the laws haven't caught up yet.
This episode is brought to you by Pella Northland. For 19.5 years, I've been building homes, and 95% of all of my homes have used Pella windows. I couldn't be happier to call them a partner in our builds and our remodels. Whether you're an architect, a designer, or a remodeler, I'd highly recommend Pella windows. They can fit old homes, new homes, reclaimed, commercial, and really everything in between. Pella is a company that we trust and that we recommend to our clients. Additionally, in management, Peter and Ed have just been absolute fantastic people to work with, as well as mentors to me personally. So when it comes time to look for a window, I'd highly recommend Pella Windows. Find more at pellanorthland.com. Also, if you're interested, you can hear episode 1 where I interview Peter and Ed together for a great listen on business and Pella windows. This episode is brought to you by Alpine Hardwood Flooring. They've been our partner now for over a decade, installing all our wood floors on all our new homes as well as our remodels. And on a personal level, Adam and Anthony Jankala, the owners, are just absolutely amazing people. They've been so supportive of my career as well as doing anything we need to make sure that our clients are happy. And they work so well with our other vendors and trade partners at not only protecting their product, but also ensuring everyone else's looks great. So if you're looking for a wood floor or for a refinish, I highly recommend Alpine Hardwood Flooring. How long have those safety machinery been around? The laser,
the saw stop saws have been around, I think, for probably 7-8 years, and it's actually expanding to other pieces of equipment now. So that's really cool to see. And the routers, right, when they run that, they stand there and they push a button, they just watch it. They watch it go. So I mean, there's quite a bit of the equipment in our shop that is like hands-free or really safe. Like we have an upcut saw. You put the board on there, the pusher goes across it, reads it off the list of whatever many pieces we want to cut, and it'll optimize it, and it just pushes it and cuts it, and the guy goes on the other end and just grabs the piece.
I think one thing that I'm really passionate about is just bringing education to everyone, really.
Yep.
But I think, students in particular, knowing that there's some great paths, and as school gets more and more expensive, and I think part of it is a stereotype. I think for sure, let's call it the inner ring suburbs. I actually got kicked under the table the other day of a good family friend. Their son is graduating and really doesn't want to go to school, but he's sort of being strong-armed into going to school because that's what their parents want.
Yep.
And I had just gotten off an interview like this with someone talking about, housing first and what they're doing. I'm like, hey, you can onboard, within 8 weeks, if you want to own a business. I was going through all this stuff, and all of a sudden I feel just like this sharp kick, and the mom is kicking me under the table, and I literally called her. I'm like, why are you kicking me?
That's awesome.
I knew why she was kicking me, but I wanted her to say it.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think that's probably that right there is the biggest hindrance.
It is.
We talk about that in our meetings, in our advisory council meetings. We've talked about loading all the parents up on a bus, having them all come to our shops and have them learn about the trades and how awesome it is and what the wage you can make in the trades and just how safe it is and all that good
and
stuff.
clean it is, and the
All that good
building's
stuff.
air conditioned.
It's become so tech focused too, right?
Yeah.
You just mentioned on the CNC machines now, which is the layout, the drafting. There's a lot of tech coming into this, and I think in about a month here we're hosting a panel at the CBUSA Summit here in Minneapolis, and there'll be builders from all over the country, and we're having a few. Katie Kath is a local remodel; she has a cabinet shop, Jay Kath, as well as Morgan Molitor and a few others talking about AI. And I would argue that I think the construction world more so than everyone's going to be affected by AI in terms of language models and just technology that comes out, right? It's going to be like a computer. However, I think the industry that is the most, not outdated, but old-fashioned, to me, is going to close the gap because it has the most room for improvement. Look at how much technology has just entered in cabinetry alone. When does CNCs really come on the scene and just make, if you don't have a CNC machine, it's hard to keep up?
The shop I worked for in '86 was one of the first ones
that long ago.
Well, yeah, so I'm old. I got gray hair.
No, I didn't realize. But no, I didn't know. That wasn't the point. I didn't realize CNC machines were that old.
Yeah,
like ones now where they pick up all the drill bits and everything.
Yeah, he was one of the first ones to have it in the Minnesota area, in the Twin Cities area, and I think about like 5-6 years after that, then it started to be more, people were buying them. Mm-hmm. But he was one of the first ones.
Yeah. I've toured a number of cabinet shops, and it seems like they're always upgrading. And it's like, I just got a new one. I just had to pull out a mortgage on the house because this one's, several $100,000.
They're not cheap.
Well, right. we just bought 2 new CNCs. So you're welcome to come see it.
Yeah. I would like that. Yeah. Anyway, going back to the school and education side, I do think that we're in marketing. Even as a builder, and I've mentioned this many times too, but I think there's a place for any interest. If someone is passionate, it doesn't have to be pounding nails or sanding. I mean, you can if you want. There's that too. But I'm just saying, like, owning a business actually is a lot less glamorous, but it also can be glamorous. I'm kind of double hedging my comments here because it can be both. We know as business owners, like, it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
Correct.
It's really difficult. That being said, there's a lot of opportunity, and I think there's more opportunity right now that will exist in the next 10 to 15 years, particularly in anything to do with homes. HVAC, plumbing, electricians, all these stats, like for every 7 HVAC, individuals that leave the field, there's only one journeyman taking their place. And another stat was like 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every day.
I know, that's scary.
Crazy.
That's scary.
And I don't know the number on this one, but what percentage of the United States businesses are owned by that group? I would argue very high. So there's a great opportunity to buy a business. And I started my company, I was 23. It never even crossed my mind to buy a company. It wasn't even something I even thought about. But even if you don't have the money, because the next question would be like, well, how am I going to afford this? But, you can imagine, like, let's go back to your youth. You're 22 years old starting a cabinet shop. What if your neighbor owned one and you work for him for a couple of years and he's like, hey, you know what? I know you don't have the money, Troy, but how about you work a takeover and within 5 years it's yours. Like, you both win. You didn't have the money to invest in it, but now you get to buy the business.
Yep.
He gets to either have a legacy moment or to continue it on, because most of these people, their business has been their family member, sometimes in a bad way. I mean, it's been like they've put too much time on it, right? I mean, you spoke a little bit just of how you've had to scale to get perspective a little bit with your own family. And I think it's really important to talk about these things because scaling can lead to really good things. But going back to buying a business, I mean, the opportunity to buy businesses now has got to be just at an all-time high.
Yeah.
Totally
and
agree.
In our industry, the different vendors we talk to, I ask quite a bit. Most of the shop owners are like 50s and above. So there's not a lot of new shops that are starting the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, now's a good time. I know you guys have 4 sons or 4 children.
Yep.
How many of them are in the business?
Yeah, the 2 boys are.
2 boys are. And have you guys talked about what that transition looks like down the road?
A little bit. The bad thing is, he goes, I see how stressed you guys are. I don't know about this, especially on some days. He goes, I don't know about this.
And the question is, how can I even afford this, right?
Yeah.
And
But
I'm like, well, we have to figure that out. We're not going to set it up for failure.
Right.
Because when I do the handoff, whoever that might be, I do not want it back like 5 years from now. Like,
we want it to continue to succeed.
Yep.
And I mean, to have as many people as you have, it was at 40, what did you say?
65.
Oh my word, 65. I just, I mean, you have processes and I mean,
correct.
I don't know, do you have an internal HR when you get that big or do you, that's Joe.
Yeah.
I can talk with you. But I mean, I assume you have systems. So let's shift the conversation a little bit. Actually, one thing I want to address, if there are people that, let's say like myself, or anybody really, how do you get involved with local high schools? How do you get involved with education? And how do you get, now I love this, I don't know who started this, what was it called? The Trades
Advisory Council?
Trades Advisory. Is that a statewide thing? Is that an area thing? Like, what is that?
I think that the Waconia School hired the gal to be in charge of that. That was part of her job. So they actually, could see that there was going to be a need.
But Dave Allings was.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah. The shop teacher from that Waconia High School who had been there.
That was like his deal.
Years.
He wanted to start and he got it started about a year before he retired.
Yeah, but that was his dad. His dad was also a shop teacher, so that was kind of their legacy. They wanted the trades just to be more promoted and people see the value of it rather than just college. Think of it as an option. The trades are definitely an option, a great option to consider.
Well, I mean, I saw something in the paper the other day, and this, it was like a linesman for, Xcel Energy can make $90,000. Mm-hmm. Like, wow. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's amazing. And I think to your point earlier, Joe, that now wages have caught up, and because supply and demand is it's making its market presence very felt. Yep. Hey, if you don't have that position, guess what? Those that are remaining get to charge more. Yeah. And the good rise to the top, and then now guess what? We actually have enough money to go and pay good talent, and you can attract people into the field versus, because so much of it seemed like for so long was those that were passionate about it were going to do it sort of regardless of the pay. Yep. But how great would it be if you could have both?
Yes.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
And I've kind of recently said that I think I've undercharged my clients for 20 years. I think I'm finally like aware enough to be like, okay, I now know my own worth, and I don't know.
We're the same way.
Yeah.
You feel that looking back,
especially
you're
in
like,
the beginning, we were just giving stuff away. Yeah.
I mean, you don't know your numbers, you don't know and you think you got to chase every ball down the street and like.
Yeah.
Well, when you're smaller too, you're doing everything, so you're always feeling like you're behind. So the number part of it, you don't dig into it as deep as you should. So you just are like, it feels right. We'll keep going, kind of a thing.
Yeah, and say yes to everything.
Yeah.
We take on every single project.
So Joe, I know you handle the bookkeeping. Is that right? Is that all in house? Do you do any sort of
all in house?
Wow, impressive.
Yeah.
HR and bookkeeping. Wow, double salary.
Thank goodness our team is really great. So
when did you realize? Let's go through the scale thing, because I think you have a really interesting story here. Tell us a little bit about when you recognized the need to scale. You mentioned earlier your 8-year-old daughter. Like, was there some aha moments? And like, did some of the scaling just happen organically? Like, walk us through some of the growing pains. You've done this for 30 years. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows here.
No. When we moved to town, right, we were on my dad's farm with a shed that I paid for, and I was paying a little bit of rent, but nothing. And then when we moved to town, there's something to be said about a mortgage. It gets you up in the morning, no matter what. Like you got to go. So we moved to town, and I never really told Joe, but I'm like, we had 3 buildings, and we started in one, and I'm like, oh, we could get to that building eventually, and maybe we'll add on and combine them. I've never really told Joe that because she wanted to.
Like
keep
a caterpillar, like the building's over here. Yeah. You're like, well, if we keep expanding, we'll eventually connect to the building.
Yeah, and that's what we did. That's what we did. That's what we did. But also during the recession. So the recession, everyone said it started in 2007, but it really hit us the most in 2011.
Yeah, 10
and
is when we
11.
ended up having to lay people off.
So that really also.
Because what was your size of company at that time?
At that point, we were 26.
Still pretty
people.
big. That's still pretty big, though.
Yeah. And then when 2011, we went to half staff, and it was interesting. We went to insurance meeting, and there was about 30 companies throughout the U.S., wood shop companies, and no matter the size, they all went to like half staff at that point. But at that point, when we had to leave half the people go, I had one of my draftsmen just calling builders, and it took about a year. But what we came up with was, we're gonna call builders and tell them, once, if you choose us, we can have a kitchen to you after the design papers are signed in 3 weeks. And all of a sudden it just took off. So a year later, we went from 13 within a year back up to 26. And then, but that really opened our eyes, or me anyway, to, we had this group of builders that we were kind of doing the same thing over and over with. And we lost a little bit of loyalty for a little while. So, everyone was looking, where can they get a better price? Understood, because everyone was so competitive. But then we just started advertising and calling to try to build our clientele. And there's good and bad at that. So you get more people to work for, but what happens when they all call at the same time? So there's that side of it. And that's why we've expanded, because we called more people, and I wanted to have it spread out more. So again, the bad side is, if 20 builders call all at the same time and you want to retain them, you better figure out how to get it done. So that's kind of the short and long of it, I think.
So in other words, that's, to me, is organic growth. I mean, you kind of did it because this drafter was just calling people. So now you have an outside salesperson that was just calling. Yep. What? How did you? See what's right.
So one other important step in that was we decided to hire a designer, and that made a huge difference with our win rates on jobs.
Talk to me about that, because that's very unique. I've worked with probably only 3 cabinet shops because I've worked with basically 2 internal ones for 20 years, 10 each. Yep. And then I worked down in Rochester with a cabinet shop because we built one down there by the Mayo Clinic. And then we'll circle back to your shop down there and why that's a huge emerging market. But what I've never seen before is having interior designers. You have 3 interior designers on your team. Tell me a little bit about that.
That was one of the best decisions I think we
Yes.
made.
Yeah.
Just the draftsmen would kind of, they didn't do a bad job with it. That just wasn't their area of expertise. So they would do those client meetings and they'd kind of come up with, but they wouldn't go through like, are you right-handed or left-handed? How do you use your kitchen? I mean, the designers asked all those questions that
You have them all scripted out now, I bet.
I think
not?
Amber has it all written down.
But I mean, they didn't go to school for that either, to be fair.
No, right. That's
Right.
what I mean.
Yeah.
That wasn't their area. That they were great
Yep.
at drafting and great at figuring out how the cabinets should be built. But that whole design piece was just, and especially as you get into those bigger houses and they want all those fancy bells and whistles, and to have a designer alongside of them to help them make those decisions. And
In a traditional cabinet shop setup, that would probably be the owners taking that role. So was that kind of a way to hand the baton on so that your client designs didn't have to be dependent on you being there?
I was thinking about this as you guys were talking. There were 2 like moments that I remember clearly as we were growing. One was, I'm going to step back just a little bit. One was when we first bought the lumberyard buildings. They were 3 different buildings, and the one we were in was basically a yellow shed. And we had a high-end client come out, and I heard her whisper, and I love her. She's great, but she whispered to her husband, I don't know if this place is good enough to do our work. Look, just the image, right? And I'm like, holy crap. If we want to play in the arena with the people that like nice stuff and like just quality stuff, we need to have an image of that. So we as we added on, we changed the whole building look, like it's completely different. And then the second thing was we had an open house and there was a builder and his wife was out, and she asked me who designs the kitchens. And I said, well, Brian and another male. And she's like, oh, I'll never hire you because a woman needs to design the kitchens. Now, if we'd flip that the other way at these times, right, we'd get ourselves in trouble. But that made me stop and think. And I'm like, holy cow. I'm like, this designer thing, I see how that could be a thing. Like, right, the meeting is going to be totally different if a woman or a designer lady goes to another person's house. They might even sit down and have a cup of coffee or tea, where a guy is just in there doing his thing, right? So those 2 moments were like kind of big moments that we actually spent a lot of money on after hearing those 2 comments.
I mean, that's impressive.
Yeah.
I think, the fact that you took the critique, the observation.
Yeah, we listened.
And then did something with it is really, really commendable and impressive. I think our next hire will be sort of like there's an architect that we work with, and they have I forget what they call her. I want to call it a client liaison. But every time you communicate, she follows up with like bullet points, and like it's just really impressive.
Yeah.
And I think our industry, other than technology, a huge surplus there, I think our industry could use a huge dose of hospitality. I've spoken about previously, I won't go into it long now, but my favorite book last year is a book called Unreasonable Hospitality, and it's all about the restaurant world. But there's a lot of those customer service things that I think that we could adopt in our field. But to what you're speaking to, the interior designers are sort of doing it organically, not only based on the way they think and feel, but it is important if the client reacts to it. It's really, really important. My mom was an interior designer, my dad was the builder, and I, years ago asked him, what do you think made you successful? And this is before I knew anything. I was just a little kid. And my dad said, he goes, your mom is the reason we sell so many homes. He goes, I can build anything, but your mom relates to people really well. And I think that spoke a little bit to that softer approach and being listened to and things like that, which you obviously tapped into with these designers. So that's impressive. One of the questions I had, and just looking at your website and kind of doing some research about this, was what percentage of your cabinetry is straight to like B2B versus B2C?
I think that varies from year to year, but
Yeah.
probably more recently it has probably been closer 50-50.
50-50.
Which is, I think, some years they will be stronger builders to builders, and
Because then it would be really helpful to have the interior designer. Because a lot of builders, like for instance, if I do a job, we're always going to have a designer, architect, a home designer, but we're also always going to have an interior designer as well on our side.
Yep.
If that is the case, and I come to you, does one of your designers still interact with our designers as well?
Yeah.
They
Correct.
represent kind of the cabinet design side of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other reason is we want the designers to get all the information and collect it all, the stain colors, the paint colors, the hardware, all that stuff. We want our engineers to get it when it's all figured out, where they can just draw and send to the shop. So I kind of explain it this way. It's a little bit like a train now. Like, the designers need to do their part, and then it needs to go to engineering, and they do their part, and then they send it to the shop, and it keeps moving. We've had people ask us if we'll do drawings for them, and I'm like, I can't do that because it interrupts our process or our train or whatever. So then all of a sudden we have this gap. So yeah, so it's
like a
boom.
slinky.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's like this, and it needs to keep flowing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I like that a lot. That actually makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
How one of the questions that I was thinking about, so you guys do finishing work in-house as well. How much of the cabinetry that goes out is finished versus finished on site?
probably 95% of it's finished. Yeah, we're really known for our finish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, somebody called this just this morning, and she said, "Oh, the finishing is that's the reason I picked you guys." So that
I
we're
mean, it's a
kind of known
huge
for that.
factor. And this is, you are an expert, I am not. I've always been biased against pre-finished cabinetry for myself as a high-end custom home builder, and I can only think of the two reasons. One is like, I would say 95. Actually, the home in Rochester was the only home that I've ever pre-finished cabinets on, and my bias was still confirmed because I'm just very picky in terms of the crown molding.
Yep.
And so when the crown molding goes on last, and the way it's caulked and the way I see those pinholes, even if they dab it with the paint, is that just me?
I got a solution.
Yeah, go
for it.
ahead.
So what we tell people is, if that bugs you, so we do all the cabinets pre-finished, and then we prime the crown, put it all on, scuff sand those joints, and then your painter can do the tape line right
Just tape
there,
it there.
and paint that. And we've done that quite a bit too when people are, they like that crown to be exactly.
Because there's a lot of high-end luxury home builders around that I know it's kind of a me thing.
Yep.
But you've heard that from others as well.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, interesting. And it's definitely more complicated because now when you have your painters, and we have very talented painters, but even so, painting in a shop is obviously going to be better than painting in the field. I'd be the first one to tell you that. But
the advantage is you gain on your schedule, because now your painters, all they have to do is paint the crown. So I'm doing a little sales pitch.
No, it makes a ton of sense to me. No, I mean, the same argument, and part of it is, here I am talking about being forward thinking. I'm pretty old school because like I feel the same way about wood floors. Like I'm kind of biased against pre-finished wood floors.
Yeah.
I like the floors finished on site. That's just, I don't know. It's how I roll. I'm also maybe it's because I'm a son of a builder who's a son of a builder. I just think like wood.
Yeah.
But I 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
I think if I was to be honest and ask my clients, most of them would not know unless I told them what my bias is.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to know how many people would actually say that or like notice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a cost difference too. We had one, and I don't know the exact number. I think on a $120,000 or $100,000 cabinet job, I think we saved a delta of about $18,000 on that Rochester job by having it all pre-painted versus painting it on site. So not only speed, but for that particular, but there was a lot of one-offs. I'd never used that painter before. I'd never used that cabinet shop before. So I don't know compared to what I normally do, how that would work here locally. Because you obviously still paid more, but their process, the cabinet shop, was like, we actually don't do it any other way.
Yeah.
And
But
so
they don't give it as an option.
it wasn't even an option.
Yeah. We give it as an option, but that's rarely selected.
Yeah, well, especially if you're known for
Yeah.
your finishes. Now I really want to tour the shop for a variety of reasons, but now I want to see it.
Yeah.
Now I'll come out and see the finishing
finishing
side.
area.
Now you got another shop that can do your job down in Rochester.
See, well, it's a lot closer. My office is here, so the client meetings. Well, I guess the client meetings will down there. Well, let's talk about Rochester. What obviously for For those not in Minnesota, the Mayo Clinic in Rochester is the second largest city in Minnesota, behind Minneapolis, St. Paul. And it's a huge market, especially a lot of transplants, a lot of doctors, a lot of people flying in for, everything. It's kind of a booming place down there.
Yeah.
There's not as many, I'm just not as familiar with as many builders down there. When we built our home, it was somebody that had toured all of our artisan homes and parade homes up here. And like, we love your style, we love your design. But would you build down here? It's like 2 hours away. And we figured it out. It was more expensive because I talked to a few other builders that had done that. And if you bring all your people from, most of my subs are Delano, Waconia,
Sure.
Elk River. And it's just like, well, man, that's a 2.5 hour drive one way. And so it ends up, you have to be compensated for that. And so our cost was several $100,000 higher than when we ended up partnering with a local builder and tapping into all their sub base there, and we were able to shave off, I don't know the exact number, let's call it 200,000.
Yeah.
And that was I would love to do that again. I think it's a great market. And the biggest thing for me is less about the trade partners, because you can interview and find the ones that you really can gravitate towards, but project management, for it to really, because I can do the design. I mean, architects can design anything anywhere. But project management is really where this stuff falls apart. And I have for 20 years have built these relationships with people that are so deep that I feel like I have, 100 project managers, because, my plumber is a project manager, my electrician, they all care so much about what we're doing that I feel like I can sort of punch beyond my weight because I've sort of empowered these people to have a voice. Let's talk about your decision to go to Rochester, and what have you found, and where are you going to go with this?
Well, our daughter and our son-in-law lived in Rochester, so then we were going down there quite a bit, and we're like, wow, this is an amazing community. And then we kind of just were like, well, I wonder how many cabinet shops are even down here. There weren't that many, and there was not even one single cabinet showroom that people could go and meet at. So we're like, well, there's something missing.
He's like, new business, new business, new business.
And then Mayo's doing their, I don't know,
$2 billion addition or whatever it is.
10-year project or whatever that they got rolling out. So it just made sense.
And the population is supposed to go from 140 to 240 by 2040.
Yeah, it's supposed to almost double in size. So hopefully, it always takes time. You don't just pop into a new market and everybody's going to trust you and know you and want to use you. So it's been a process. So we were slowly earning their trust and doing some projects down there so people can see our work and see our quality and all that good stuff. So we definitely would. Hopefully we'll get.
And so you have a showroom and 2 people that are kind of hosting it down there?
There's Jody that works in the showroom, and then Sam and Jared, they do the installs down there. Okay.
And you have enough work to keep the 3 of them busy?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
And then, like you said, if it's dry, then bring them back.
Yeah, they bring them up. Yeah.
Do they live down there then, I assume?
In Owatonna.
Yep. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's pretty close.
Yeah. And we had a house on the spring tour, and we had one last year on the fall tour, I think. Yeah.
Yep.
We have a house that we could put in the tour, but it's over a number of, their tours are a little bit different down there than they are up here. And so anyway, the clients have been in there for a year, and I just thought they've got a young family, and to ask them to move out now, it's just, that's always a really hard part. When it's not a spec home or something like that, it makes it quite challenging.
Yeah.
This is always, I should know the difference between this, and I think I do in my perception, but what is the difference between custom cabinets and box cabinets? Or I mean, the word custom implies so many different things, and there's so many biases around it. I think it's probably analogous to vinyl windows and wood windows, but do you think that's a fair analogy or not?
Yeah. So the custom cabinet thing too, I struggle with it too. Even when we talk to different cabinet shop owners, they're like, oh, we're really custom. And I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah, like custom or not custom or super custom. You have to have a word in front of it that defines how custom you are.
But I mean, some shops are, they're gonna do a face frame cabinet with an overlay, and they want to keep the overlay the same. And some shops that's all they're gonna do. We, on the other hand, we let the designers, I'll just use the word, maybe push us around a little bit, and the architects, they're like, I want it like this, and this is how we're going to do it. And we usually say, okay, we'll do that.
Figure it out.
So we do a lot of face frame inset We rarely do face frame overlay with the client base that we're doing stuff for. We do a lot of frameless stuff, and we do a lot of slab grain matching. So and kind of anything in between. Someone comes with this concept, and we're like, yeah, we can do it. With some success, and some were like, oh, why did we agree to this? But yeah, I guess on the custom side, generally, most shops are using 3/4 inch material or 5/8. When you go to like a box cabinet, generally they're using like a 3/8 inch sides for material, and they're using like an 1/8 inch back. And generally on the custom shops, we're using 3/4 or 5/8, and we're using 1/4 inch backs or with a hanger, or we're using a 1/2 inch back. The custom stuff is just usually more heavy. And the other big key difference is I know the semi-custom stuff or whatever, the box cabinets, they generally will do a pretty nice slide and a nice drawer box, but the hinges is usually where they fall a little short. They usually use those compact hinges, and generally the door is off of the cabinet. It sticks off the cabinet face quite a bit, and the adjustment side of it is usually one screw, so it's not as usually near as good of a hinge for the doors.
And especially over time.
Yeah.
I've often, our cabinet shop, we do, mostly it's the maple drawers with dovetail.
Yep.
And I just explained to a client, because I'm obviously selling it, and I'm like, oh, look at this. And, whether someone cares about that or not, it's more just the explanation, part of the story. And not that we haven't done melamine boxes, because they are easier to clean, obviously.
Yep.
But from a standpoint of longevity, especially if you do inset, which pretty much 95% of all our cabinets are going to be inset.
Yeah.
To your point, hardware is a big cost difference. And I remember during COVID, it was like, because you guys were probably on allotments too, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I don't even know any other company other than Bloom, which I think is out of Austria. And it was funny, my cabinet shop, actually, his wife, I think his in-laws actually lived in Austria. So they went there, and I joked, like, did you go to Blum's factory and get some? And they're like, he's like, he goes, yeah, I've actually asked them to go, and they only sell it through, large distributors, whoever
Sure.
you guys,
Yeah.
I don't even know who they are. But the point was, is everyone was on allotments,
Yes.
and you could only get what you had before. And we were joking that if you could, you'd go over and with a couple suitcases and just load up on Bloom hardware, because that was the limiting factor. Because then when you had the boom in 21, 22,
it was crazy.
you could only produce the number of cabinets that you could put hardware on.
Correct.
And that was a great chance to scale. But if you already weren't sort of big, good luck scaling when you can't get any of the materials.
So we did the Norwood thing and the Rochester thing while that was happening. So we actually were growing.
You were expanding.
So
Yeah.
we were having lots of trouble. We use Bloom too. I told my vendor, I'm actually good friends with him, and I'm like, dude, I need to get this stuff. Like, I know you're doing allocation, but we're growing, so that doesn't work. So at some point, I got to try to find different hinges if you can't provide. And that's not easy either, because on the other side, the other manufacturers, Grass and Salici, they're like, nope, we're allocating to our customers first. So it was not fun.
It was miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was thinking of in terms of, because you hear box cabinets as the ones that are not as custom, right? But
Yeah.
I mean, you can still get them in different shapes. So in some ways it is custom. But when you go to, let's say, a Home Depot or pre-manufactured lines, what would you say is the difference in terms of longevity? Like, what is the difference? Why should someone invest in custom cabinets?
So probably the biggest reason is the custom cabinet guys are going to build it to the exact space, right to the 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch.
So no fillers.
So no fillers, correct. And structurally, people should talk to the granite guys, because some of the really thin sides on the cabinets, eventually, once the granite's in there, it'll settle, actually. It won't support that granite over a longevity. So it wouldn't be a big deal if you put granite against the wall and it's against sheetrock, but if you tile to the granite and all of a sudden stuff is shrinking, pretty soon you got gaps going on. And
Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard that one as a line of thinking.
Yep.
I mean, granted, because I've always ever had custom. I guess it's never
Yeah.
been something that's ever come up on a personal home.
Yep. So
Interesting. From a longevity standpoint, I mean, what can you expect the lifespan of a custom cabinet to be versus, let's say, a box cabinet? I know it's super dependent on how it's used, but let's just say you have a young family, given it, young kids are pretty much the worst on everything. So let's just take a young family of 5, and they've got 3 kids. If they're going to live in their house for, let's just say 20 years, so they're done with high school, versus, let's say, a custom cabinet home. This is a tough question, but do your best with it. Like, are you going to have to replace those box cabinets? Are they going to break down? Like, what's going to happen? Or is it longer than that?
You're going to have a hardware failure probably more than anything on the box cabinets over time. The custom cabinets, I would ask the question too, if it's a stained product, right, and you ding it up a little bit, it usually doesn't look too bad. But if it's stark white,
Painted.
and you get those same dings on the same cabinets, but it's stark white, people don't like that.
Well, I mean, I get
that'll
it's like
get
little saw
replaced
teeth.
soon.
I mean, I've got like the butter knife thing happening on my bread knife. It's always the trash door, the dishwasher door,
and
the
the sink
refrigerator
area.
door, and the sink. It's wherever there's water. And then trash is especially with the inset. I mean, it just, you're constantly loading it. And actually, now that you think, my wife's out of town this week for, she went to the U.S. Open with her sister-in-laws. I meant to surprise her and have the painter come over and paint the edges because they need to be painted again.
Ours do too.
So the other thing is nothing is without maintenance. I think too, educating people in general. I feel like the older generation is much better at understanding this. I was just chatting with someone recently, but my generation and younger, I mean, the idea that I've been in homes before where they're like, oh, my AC froze up. And we're like, trust me, I'm not the handy one. I'll like go downstairs. I'm like, well, let's look at your filter. And they're like, oh, we didn't even know that was there. I'm like, oh my word. And it's just, you can imagine what it looks like. And you're like, oh my word. And so it's like, what is the future without full-time service? I mean, one of my biggest concerns is these homes that we build. I mean, they've gotten tighter and tighter, and I think that's not like we're going to undo that, Jeannie. That's going to be how it goes. But, energy efficiency and all this stuff, but it all falls apart if you don't, maintain it.
Yeah. I love your analogy about because people say, are the cabinets going to get scratched? Are they going to get dinged? Well, Troy will say, well, if you take a knife and you go and scratch it on your car, your car is going to scratch or it's going to ding if you
I actually don't say that to the customers, but I want to.
You say it to me, and I'm like, that is such a great analogy, though, because if your kid runs into your cabinet, it's probably going to ding, just like it will with your car.
The thing I love about cabinetry is you use it. Yeah. I think back to when my dad built homes for 30 years and mine, we used to do this. We had this word, I'm not thinking of like a word search. I don't know the right word, but like the more clients we gave them a list of like 20 words, and the more a client voted on the word, the bigger it got. And so we used to give it to them as a survey at the end. And cabinetry, trim, and then a couple people's names, like my trimmer, my cabinet guy. Like maybe it's also because on a custom home, they spend the most time, like your cabinet shop. You spend a lot of time designing it. And especially with ours, it would be the owner talking to, so they get really familiar with them. I mean, and cabinetry is so suited to a specific lifestyle, right-handed, left-handed, as you already mentioned. Height. I'm being 6'2", I'm always saying, hey, can we get these countertops at 38 inches versus 36, which would be, our standard here anyway. And, anyway, the point is it's so interactive, and so I feel like cabinetry more so than a lot of the other trades, you guys get close. I would say that cabinetry and trim, and maybe just because from a trimming standpoint, they spend so much time in their home trimming, and they get to see them, and they see visually what like. We had Randy Janelle on from Minnesota Custom Drywall, and I was laughing. I'm like, drywall is like pretty low on the totem pole. I'm like, nobody walks through and is like, oh man, nice, you got a killer drywall job. Like, who is your drywall guy? He's incredible. No, but cabinets, it happens all the time. I think it's one of the most celebrated pieces of a home. I think windows are up there. Cabinetry.
And tile work, probably.
And tile work's up there too.
Yeah.
But I think cabinetry more than anything else because you touch it the most, you use it the most, and visually it changes the space the most, in my opinion. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that.
That and like beams and stuff like that throughout the house, like the millwork side of it. You're right. Yeah. Yep.
We definitely really get to know our
Yeah, it's pretty
clients
fun.
because it's a long process, especially at the bigger houses. There's so many decisions that are made, and you're contacting them so much because you're going back and forth with colors or with different styles, and the relationship is it's so fun to watch when Amber or the other designers too. They'll come up and they'll hug her and they'll be like, come in, you got to see it, because sometimes they don't go back until it's all at the end and we're delivering a gift or something, and they'll be like, Amber, come in and see you. It turned out so great, and sometimes they'll even be crying because they're so happy with how it turned out, and they know how much effort we put into it, all of it too, and they just are so appreciative. It's so awesome.
I think, I mentioned this before as we close up. I want to hear a good fail story if you have any that come to mind, and I'll just prep it with what could have been a fail story. Give you some time to think. When we built our most complicated contemporary home, actually the home you came through. So that home that you came through, all that wood, I think I mentioned to you in the bathroom, it was all olive wood, avidori, fiddleback, all this wood was from Africa. And it was the height of COVID. And I think it took like 16 months to get this stuff or whatever. It was forever. And the cabinet shop was a smaller cabinet shop, 8-10 people. But he said he was so worried because everything was bookend matched and it was just beautifully grain matched. And he's like, if anything got cut wrong, I mean, you throw out that whole kitchen. It's gonzo. And he did it all himself. He was just paranoid. And he said, if I ever do a home like that again, I'm taking out an insurance policy specifically for a job. I'd never thought about that. And I think he was dead serious. He's like, I don't remember. Let's just call it a $300,000. I don't know what it was. It was a huge one. And the point was, he's like, a job like that could put you out of business if it went wrong, because if you have to replace all of it, I mean, it's no joke. And, he was not saying that tongue in cheek. He was dead serious. And I remember the homeowner, who was an amazing fan. I think you maybe met him. He was just an incredible guy. And he had such an affinity for all of our trades and loved them all. But he used to always kind of say, what's taking so long? I'm like, dude, like the wood. I used to joke with the architect. I'm like, is there no wood in North America? Like, is all the wood in Africa? Like, that's why it's taking so long. And on top of COVID, on top of Bloom. And by the way, only the owner of the company is willing. Anyway, it's not quite a fail story, but like the fail story would have been if like we had wrecked those cabinets, and everyone was pretty paranoid, because we do a great job. We do an amazing job of trying to protect stuff, but stuff happens.
Yeah.
A guy's, doing a light fixture, falls off a ladder.
Yep.
How are you going to stop that? Gravity? Good luck.
Yeah.
You rub up. I've seen it before where we had a guy doing a paint touch up over a window, and it was to fix the window, and he went away, and his tape measure on his hip, he had reached up. He wasn't quite tall enough, and his tape measure went and rubbed against the window and scratched the millwork on the window. And I'm like, oh man, you can't make this stuff up. Mm-hmm. Anyway, what are some good, everyone loves a good fail story. You guys got some good stories of things that have gone wrong?
Well, when he talks about that I just think of that job we did with Tara in Wayzata.
That's the one that came to mind.
Yeah, because something did happen. The fire or the water sprinklers went off.
Oh no!
And we're pretty much done installing.
We had about 3 days worth, maybe 2 days worth of install of all the cabinets, and a sprinkler head got hit, and it was spraying water out. It took like 8 minutes, 10 minutes till they got it turned off. And in my head, I'm like, we're going to be doing all this over again. And it was kind of the same deal. We ordered all the veneer from a company that laid it all up in Indiana from one tree log. So it was all book matched.
Oh,
yeah.
So I was just like, oh my gosh. And they brought in a company. We wiped up all the water. They brought in a company that tested the moisture. They tested it 3 times and it passed. So we had to take a few things out and do a few things, but all the cabinetry was saved.
Yeah.
Well, but think about this. It was all pre-sealed, wasn't it?
It was pre-finished.
So imagine if that had been raw wood, like one of my homes.
And the other part of it was that November, I think? All that stuff, because of the stairwell, had to be craned up on the top of the building.
Oh my
So that was all going through my head. I'm like, I happened to be at the job site installing. I helped on that one.
Yeah, because there was the 3rd level. And
oh my gosh!
They had to go in through a window because
Yeah,
they couldn't.
with everything.
The cabinets wouldn't fit up the staircase.
Because they wanted it all built with the tall, whatever sides,
Everything matching.
no seams.
I have this idea, this concept. That's like another. It didn't quite fail, but it got close to failing.
Yeah.
I would love to do a podcast panel, or even just like have everyone video like this concept of like losers are winners. Like, this idea that what we put out there in terms of marketing is a polished gem. We're
sure.
marketing our best. But that's we have a lot of pretty bad days, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we should celebrate but all of it's real. And one of my favorite quotes is, "Don't judge me what I do on my best day. Don't judge me what I do on my worst day. Judge me on what I do consistently in between." And I've always really liked that. And, because there are days, they're having a bad day. You give them a pass. I mean, honestly, it's analogous to like marriage or kids or all of it, because it's all kind of the same in terms of just having patience with each other. But I think I would love to sort of celebrate the failures that lead to successes, because I think that's what separates business owners that continue to scale. I mean, I'm still kind of enamored with this scaling operation that I feel like I've done a poor job of getting to like how you've done all this, because I want to do like another part where you just like go step by step, year by year, and you'd almost have to write it down, because I'm guessing, well, you might have a plan to scale. A lot of it just happens as you're reacting in the moment. Like you saw opportunity in Rochester. It wasn't a grand plan. You just like, hey, there's opportunity here. There's no showrooms down here. Let's start a showroom.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The other part of what you're saying is not everything works perfect. So if you come to a problem area, how do you deal with it, and how do you resolve it? Like I feel like the good companies, if they do take however you want to call it, a step backwards on something, how do they resolve that? And the good ones are good at making it right, and the bad ones are not good at making it right.
Well, I don't know how to, this is the worst word in the world, not the worst word in the world. It's not the most articulate thing in the world, but the figure it out factor. Yes. Like if I was to hire somebody, and like if you had to like check off like the things that they have, like over all other things, other than maybe a positive attitude, because I do really like positive people, it would probably be the figure it out factor.
Yeah.
Because if I have that,
yep.
I can do what you just said.
Yeah.
We can figure it out.
Yeah.
And you look at, building is messy. I mean, I often tell my clients that, Ford F-150 rolls off 100,000 trucks a year, and they in the same pieces on every single one by robots in a factory, and they have callbacks on them. Yeah. We're building a one-of-a-kind house outside in the elements with human hands over the course of a year or more. It's amazing we get as much right as we do.
Yeah.
And and you need the collection of the team, people like yourselves, everyone on the team, to say, how can we do this together in a way that the clients are happy? And it's kind of I'm just kind of enamored. I mean, it's like, I guess why I love building is because you get all of these talented, passionate people with their specific crafts, and get them all together so that you can create a home for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's a amazing thing that it all comes together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sometimes when you're at the job site a couple of weeks before the closing, though, you're like, how is this all going to come together? And somehow it does.
When there's 30 subs in the house.
They're working on top of each other, and it's crazy.
You're going to like this. So we're coming up on our first home where I've done this. So I shout out to Brad Levitt and AFT Construction down in Arizona. But he kind of talked about this at a seminar I was at, where, you just described the chaos of the last 30 days. And everyone knows what I'm talking about. You're nodding your head right now, Troy, because we all know and laugh. Like,
you want to show up first so you get a good parking spot.
Yeah, you're worried about your parking lot. I'm worried about getting the client in the home. Well, we just and it all starts in the beginning, because it takes about a year for us to change things, right? Our contracts and also the message that I'm delivering to my client. So we're coming up now on the end where we're definitely going to be done probably in about 3 weeks, but the client cannot move in till October 12th, 30 days after we're quote done. And I'm not the only one that does this, but I don't know why it took me so long to adopt this, because it makes way better sense. Like building an airplane while you build it is a terrible idea, but the majority of builders know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. But the second part of this is like, why do we keep moving our clients in before the house is done? It makes no sense. And what happens is with the punch list, this 30-day crusher,
never quits.
It never quits, and it takes it. I don't know that it takes 10,000% longer to do it after when they're moved into the house than if you do it ahead of the house. Yeah. And we had one last year where she moved in, I would say early. She said, this is the time you told me. So whose fault that is? That's probably us for not delivering this message ahead of time. And we had our normal punch list, but between their travel schedule, their kids' schedule, it took us 8 months to get the 30-day punch list done. So now we're going to do the punch list when the house is done. Yep. And then guess what? We get 30 days to actually do what's on the punch list. So when you move in, there's nothing. Anything that goes on that list then is a 1-year callback. Yeah. We're not doing anything till 1 year after that. I'm excited to see how it
Yes.
goes, but it
Yeah.
only worked
Yeah.
because I sold it on the front end to the client, so they knew the expectation.
Yep.
Because there obviously is a temptation, and we'll see how it goes. I mean, knock on wood here, in 3 weeks when they drive by the house and be like, hey, the house is done. We're lucky on this one because it has a detached garage that we had. It's a lot of super narrow, so we had to build the garage last. And so they'll at least see the garage is catching up to the main house. So they'll, because you can imagine if like the sod is in and everything else is done, they're like, well, why can't we move in? You're like, well, because of this new thing I'm trying out.
No, we talk about that all the time. We have to educate them. We have to educate them.
Yeah.
Because if we don't tell them and then they're mad, that's on us because we didn't tell them. But if we've told them 3 or 4 times that, you know, we have to be able to pull our vehicles up so we can get those big, huge, heavy cabinets into the house. We can't park 2 blocks down the road. We have to be able to back up to the house.
The best part. Now that you mention it, you're right. My cabinet guy does always get the best. He's always like right next to the front door.
It's important.
I mean, it makes sense. It's the heaviest things.
Yeah.
But if we didn't tell them that and they don't know, then that's on us. But if we told them that when we come and we don't want you or your pets or your children, these cabinets are super heavy and it's difficult to get them in, and we're trying to go upstairs sometimes with them. We got to let them know our rules in advance. And that's been huge for us. That's been helping a ton. So
Love it.
yeah,
Love it.
yeah.
Thank you very much for your time and
thank you.
for coming in. And I'll stop out and check out the space here. I want to see.
Sounds
I want to
fun.
see this building. This 5 remodels. What this looks like. So and I want to see the. Do you have pictures of the old yellow shed
do.
where the lady said is
Yeah.
like that's ugly?
I might have even had a mullet back then.
Ooh,
You
that's
did. It's true.
classy.
Yeah, it's been a journey.
I mean, if we had an unlimited budget, I would do Troy. Troy mullets. Like instead of hats, that would actually be. Actually, that's a good hat idea. All right. Well, we'll have
Thank you
everything
for
in the
having us.
Yeah, you're
Yes,
welcome.
thank
Well,
you.
thanks
Appreciate
again
it.
for supporting the kids, Charity, and for
Yeah.
coming on and telling your story.
Absolutely.
And we'll have all your contacts information in the show notes. If anyone wants to reach out, they can.
Sounds
And
good.
thanks again for coming on.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Curious Builder podcast today. One of the things that you can do if you appreciate the content that the show is producing, if you appreciate the guests that we're bringing on, is to help support us. Some of our sponsors obviously have done that throughout the years, and we're very thankful for that. But many of you listeners out there have asked what you can do. Well, other than telling your friends about it and sharing it on your own channels, you can also head to our merch page and help support us through buying some of the merchandising. We have shirts available, we have notebooks, and we have hats now available. All these companies are small boutique companies that we partner with that we believe in. So not only are you helping the Curious Builder podcast, you're also helping support small business. One of those companies, of course, is Harnish. I've spoken about them on the podcast before. I'm wearing one of the shirts right now. It is the softest and most durable shirt you can possibly buy. I call it the softest armor you can have on your body. It's pretty amazing, their stuff. Hive notebooks, I've been using those now for a couple of years, and they have stone note paper, which is actually pretty cool. It's waterproof, it's tear proof. So if you've got a notebook out in the field, or if you just want a really cool notebook, I'd highly recommend getting one of those. We hand those out to our collectives as well. So if you're in our collective, you've already gotten one. And then lastly, our hats. The hat, actually, we partnered with a local company in Colorado called BOGO. And what's really cool about them is they are sweat resistant. I wear them for ultra running, keep the sun out of my eyes, but it's also just a really, really cool looking hat. It's got an amazing multicolored plaid bill on it. So again, these are things that you can do to support the podcast, as well as getting some cool merch out of the deal. So head to our merch page on the CuriousBuilderPodcast.com. Thanks for listening to the Curious Builder podcast. If you like what you listen to, please give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It really means a lot. It's a great way for us to just understand what you like about the podcast and what we can keep doing. So like and review, and please share with your friends and family. Find out more at CuriousBuilderPodcast.com.